Hey gunfighters, this is one that may anger some people, but I do best of all the time. Top 5, best of. What about really bad guns, right? Really bad. In my training and experience, in my opinion, really bad guns. So, say no to drugs, no Xanax, no lithium, whatever people are doing to calm down. Just take a deep breath and relax, because I'm going to tell you some guns that I think are really bad. Bad guns. Today on Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns and gunfighting the right way, Judeo-Christian values, making godly men strong and strong men godly. With that, a quick bio. First and foremost, a Christian. God is number one in my life and everything that I do. And this podcast should be no different. I don't try and segment my life and say, oh, God is in this part this one day a week when I do whatever, and then the rest I just do whatever I want. No, God is in the center and should be at the center of my life all the time. Again, this podcast is no different. Been blessed to be Marine Corps combat veteran, urban warfare instructor, law enforcement, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion a few times over, professional big game hunter and guide, and many other things. But enough about that. Let's get into some bad guns. If Leroy Brown was a gun, just bad. Let's talk about it. Okay, the first one, I'm going to ease you into this. Probably nobody would object to this one. How about the Zip 22? I remember when these came out and I saw one, I just remember thinking, what? I never shot one, but by all accounts, very unreliable. I don't really know how you're supposed to hold it. The cool thing that you could do with it is mount it, because I think it's got a rail attachment to mount it, like mount it under a gun. So you could have like your go-to bug-out gun in a centerfire caliber and have this thing underneath, which seems pretty cool, except for I do believe that would make it an AOW, which means that you have to get a tax stamp, which is probably costing more than the gun is worth. I don't really know what they were going for there, but the Zip 22. And there's not a lot of them out there, and you probably don't have one, so probably not going to make you mad. The next one may anger some people. I'm okay with that. And remember, this is Gunfighter Life. If you want just fun guns to go to the range and plink with, that's fine. But I'm talking about practical guns, and I don't think this one is. The Keltec KSG. Just why? Okay, if you just want one to shoot and have fun with, okay. In my experience, not reliable, which I think this is marketed as a defensive type gun, so probably you want reliable. You might say, oh, it holds 14 rounds. Okay, a normal extended tube shotgun is going to hold 7 to 9 rounds if you're talking a defensive shotgun of double-aught buck. What situation can you not fix with 7 to 9 rounds of double-aught buck you're going to fix with 14? I can't really think of one. I'm not for limiting capacity. You have as much capacity as you want, but I think that 7 to 9 rounds of double-aught buck is plenty, and I'd rather have 7 to 9 rounds than a gun that runs reliable, like a Mossberg 590 or even a Maverick 88 that's a fraction of the cost of this gun. Also, it's a bullpup, which there are some advantages to bullpups, but I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze most of the time, and I certainly don't here. One of the great things about the shotgun is how it points, how it shoots quick and handles fast. You kind of negate all that and get this, in my opinion, very kludgy apparatus that is just not good. And Keltec makes some good stuff. I am picking on Keltec here, but Keltec makes some really cool stuff. They make some really good guns. They make some really reliable guns. The Sub 2000 is a good, affordable, folding PCC. They make some good guns. The PF9's not a bad gun. There are many. This is not one of them. The Keltec KSG. I don't get it. If you say yours is reliable, have you taken it to a training class? Have you run all different kinds of ammo through it? Because in my experience, not reliable. and just handles worse than a regular shotgun. Since we're on the bullpup train, let's get a little bit old school. There was a time when bullpups were all the craze, and you saw a lot of militaries looking at bullpups, adopting bullpups. The French, the British, and many others, and many of them dropped them. Gone the way of Blockbuster. Just in that same kind of genre, that same kind of time era. Just not really a thing anymore for most countries. Well, what you might have done in that time period when bullpups were all the rage was get what I consider a fairly decent gun, the Ruger Mini 14, and make it a bullpup. Your purpose-built bullpups are generally not worth it in my opinion. There are some good ones. The Tavor is not a bad gun. It's probably the best of the bullpups. When you take a Mini 14 and try to make it a bullpup, it saddens me a little bit inside. You take a good handling carbine with a good natural handling of a lot of carbines. Just a lot of things I like about the Mini 14, and you just kind of erase them and make it a bullpup. If you've never seen one of these abominations, you might want to go look up the Mini 14 bullpup. Just taking a good gun and spending money to make it worse. I don't get it. This one may anger some people. The Tourist Judge for practical gunfighting. If you just want one to have fun with it and shoot different patterns with it and whatever, but it's, in my opinion, worse for defense than almost any other option. I like 410. I like 410 for home defense in a shotgun, in a pump shotgun that's going to cost less and be more reliable, be easier and quicker to point if you're talking about home defense. I'm not against 410, but I'm against 410 in this gun because it patterns horribly. There is one practical purpose I can think for this. I did know somebody that they did a lot of elk hunting and stuff out in Idaho, and if you don't know, in Idaho, a lot of times you can just shoot grouse when you're out elk hunting if you want to. You probably don't want to use your elk rifle for that. So you might want the Tourist Judge with birdshot if you get a good shot at a close-in grouse because they're delicious. I'm talking about for like defense, not my first, second, third, fourth. I would take it over a sharp stick, but again, worse than almost any other option as far as concealed carry, defensive handgun, home defense. Patterns on it are bad. If you talk about 45 Colt, 45 Colt's a good round. You're getting a lot of free bore on that. Why not just get, then if you want a revolver, why not just get something else that's like a purpose-built 357 that's going to be smaller, handier. If you've never dealt with a Tourist Judge, they're not small, light guns. And if you really want to stick with this concept of I want to shoot a 45 long Colt and a 410, I think there's another gun that does it better if this is really what you want. The Smith & Wesson Governor is a lightweight alloy frame, so it's lighter. It holds an extra round, so you get 6 rounds. You still get to shoot those rounds, plus you can shoot 45 ACP. That's right, that one will shoot 45 ACP. Even if you did want to stick with this route, I still think it's a bad choice. So the Tourist Judge, just for like practical gunfighting defense, I don't get it. How about the OG, the original version, 320? No, I like a 320. I was shooting an M17 today. I'm working on kind of a practical gunfighter practice for you guys. I'm doing a lot of work on that. I was out shooting my M17 today. It's one of my often carried guns. Well, why would I put this one on here? Well, because the original one was that one that could go off when you dropped it, when you fell on it. Most guns in the past 100 years have been drop safe. And SIG came out with this one, and it could go off when you dropped it. It could go off if you hit it the right way. That's unacceptable. Now, I'm not a SIG fanboy, although for some reason my two go-to carry guns ended up being SIGs. SIG makes a lot of really good guns, and obviously I trust my life to SIG handguns. They make some really good ones. This was a major faux pas on their part when they came out with the 320. There is a reason most other polymer striker-fired handguns have that segmented trigger, whether it's referred to as the Glock Dingus or the segmented trigger of the Smith & Wesson or many other designs. There's a reason they have that. And I just wonder why the 320 didn't have that. It would have solved that problem. It would have been an easy thing to replace if somebody didn't like it or something like that. The trigger on those is not super hard to replace anyway. Why not give it one with that passive safety? It's kind of been the standard on polymer striker-fired handguns for a long time. It seems like, why? The new ones still have a good trigger and they're drop safe. To be fair, you can only drop a gun probably so many times, and it's a really rare occurrence, pretty rare, but it just seems like that was a bad move. Now, they fixed it. The newer 320s and the M17s and everything are fine. But we could probably say that the original 320 that could go off when you dropped it was a bad gun. Here's one that might get me some hate mail. Any Glock in .40 caliber ever. Yeah, I said it. Come at me. When I was LAPD, my first issued duty gun was a Glock in .40 cal. I carried one, trust my life to, until I went to a .45 and then thankfully down to a 9mm. And I don't think .40 cal is a bad round always. I think it's a bad round in Glock for a lot of reasons. Glock took a 9mm gun and just shoved a 40 into it. If you look at the frame and everything, it's the same. This led to some issues in some of the early .40 caliber Glocks exploding. That's a big deal. And even if they don't explode, I think they fixed that problem when they went to the later generations, to be fair. But the juice is not worth the squeeze. .40 cal is a snappy round to shoot. And I don't care how good you control recoil. If you reduce it, you can shoot faster and more accurate. Pick one. Or both. Shot recovery time, your split times are going to be better. And although the .40 cal is more powerful round per round, and it is, to be fair, I don't think the juice was ever worth the squeeze for the .40 cal, and I certainly don't in the lightweight Glocks. Glock 22 bad, Glock 23 bad, Glock 27. Lighting a packet of Black Cats and putting them in a soda can and trying to hang on to it. Like, what? Why? .40 cal can be a good round if you chamber it in a bigger full-size handgun or a gun that was made initially for the .40, not a gun that you took a 9mm and shoved a .40 into it. As much as I rag on Glocks, the Glock 17 is not an unpleasant gun to shoot. I don't like the way they point or the ergonomics, but they're a good, reliable gun. I've carried and trusted my life to Glock 17. I ran one as a private contractor. They shoot pretty good. The same thing in a .40, the Glock 22 does not shoot very good. I would never, ever, under any circumstances, if you put two on the table, a Glock, the original, the older one, the Glock 17, and a Glock 22, I would never choose the Glock 22 for anything ever, which to me says it's a bad gun when the older version of the older gun was better. In fact, if you offered me the Glock 22 or the Glock 21, which is a gun that I did carry on duty, choosing to, I think the recoil is better in the Glock 21. I think the recoil is better in the 45 than the 40. It's not nearly as snappy. It's got more of a slow roll kind of push, which I prefer. If you offer me Glock 21 SF or a Glock 22, I'm going to take the Glock 21. There's almost no, unless you just offered it to me over a sharp stick or over the tourist judge, right? There's probably no scenario where I'm going to pick a Glock in .40 cal over the older, like a Glock 9mm or a Glock 45. I don't get it. If you have a Glock in .40, maybe consider redeeming it and getting a 357 SIG conversion barrel. You'll still have a Glock, but at least it'll be in a sweet caliber. This next one, I got to look it up, to be honest, because I don't even know what it's called. I have so little interest in it. Okay. This lever action AR. Oh, and this saddens me because it's made by Bond Arms. And I'm not rocking a Derringer for CCW, but Bond Arms makes some good Derringers. So let me tell you, I got no problem with Bond Arms. And this kind of saddens me, but this lever action AR, I don't get it. I don't get it. I so don't get it. And I know some of you are probably screaming, it's for the restricted states. Okay, even in the restricted states, even in Canada. Oh, Canada, with your gun laws. Oh, Canada. I can think of better choices than this thing. If you are choosing between this thing and many other choices, probably choose the other one. He offered me this, not to sell, because it probably costs a lot of money, because it actually probably is made well if it's made by Bond Arms. I can't sell it, but I have to actually have it as like a truck gun, and you offer me this, or just an old packed-in Cosmoline and a Rinco SKS. I'm going to pick the SKS. I would pick, 10 rounds of good, reliable semi-auto 7.62x39 over this lever action mixed breed thing. Or a Mossberg 590 if it's for a truck gun, or almost anything. And if you say maybe for hunting coyotes or something, well then just give me a bolt action, or what's commonly referred to as a Cub Scout, like a scout rifle in 5.56, Mossberg MVP, or many, many other options. I'm saying it's not made well. I'm not saying it's not reliable. I don't even know that. I'm grasping for a reason for this gun to exist, and I am coming up empty. You knew it was coming, gunfighters. You knew it was coming if you listened for any length of time. Springfield. Now I'm going to start this off with, there is a gun that I have hopes for. The Springfield Echelon. Please be a good gun. I want Springfield to come out with a good, reliable handgun. Because heretofore, I have never seen it. I have never seen one make it through training. I've never seen anybody I know carry one professionally that hasn't broken. Ever. Period. The XD. It is not a good American-made gun. It is a Croatian gun stamped Springfield. But again, I've never seen one go through serious hardcore use, like professional use. Not, I take it to the range once a year, but like actual hardcore use, like a 2,000 plus round training course. Most people I know that try to run these professionally, it doesn't work out well for them. Also, they're 1911s. I have first-hand experience with this, as in I had one and the thing would not run. That's, long story short, when I got out of the gun writing business, I briefly did that, like writing articles. It's all good if you write like a good review, like I wrote a really good review on a really cheap gun that worked really well. And then I wrote a review on the Springfield 1911 because it just was horrible. And it didn't get published. And it's not like my writing was any worse. It was just a lot of gun magazines only want to publish the great stuff, the good stuff. Like, tell me how awesome this is so we can make people run out and spend their money on it. I wouldn't advise anybody to run out and spend their money on a Springfield 1911. And I like 1911s. But I don't like Springfield 1911s, and it's not just me. I had 2 guys when I was commander of a tactical team. And these were the gunsmiths on the team. I purposely hired a couple of guys that were not just good shooters and professional gunfighters, but gunsmiths to help out the team. And they both tried to get these 1911s working. I'm talking professional certified gunsmiths. And they were just apologists for these guns. Like, oh, it'll work when I do this, it'll work when I do that. It'll, if I just mess with this and do that and file this thing and Dremel this thing, it'll probably work. Man, it's not a cheap gun anyway. It's not like they're cheap 1911s. They're expensive. Is this where that myth of the unreliable 1911 comes from? Maybe, because everyone I've ever seen is unreliable. Now, if you have one that's reliable, good. I'm glad. And I'm talking about you run a couple of thousand rounds to it. It's reliable. Good. But I have yet to see it. I honestly, and it saddens me to say this, I don't know how Springfield stays in business, but they must. There are a couple of guns that I like from Springfield. The M1As are not bad. I like the M14. It was one of my first competition guns. Maybe one of my first competition guns, an M14. The Springfield M1A is not a bad gun, but I can think of more models that are bad than are good. And the only thing I can think of is people just like the name Springfield, and a lot of people that get guns don't actually run them hard. They don't ride them hard and put them away wet. But again, this is gunfighter life. I went on a little bit of a rant there and erased it. I don't want to be unfair. I want to be... I don't mind saying it like it is, but... And again, Springfield has the Echelon. And from what I've seen so far, it has promise. You know my general rule for gunfighting guns. Give it 3 years, make sure it's reliable and proven. But so far, the Springfield Echelon could be a good, reliable, modern handgun. And I'm not writing Springfield off just because, now this one's still made in Croatia, but I don't really have any problem with Croatia. Realize you're not getting an American-made gun, but if it's reliable and rugged and dependable, which I hope that it is, I don't want Springfield to put out bad guns, then it'll be a good, reliable Springfield handgun. Let's hope that that is the case. I had more on Springfield, but I'm just going to leave it there. I'll leave it on a good note. Yeah. Here's an even more positive note. The vast majority of guns are really good. I do a lot of top 5 episodes, and this gun's really good episode, and the best of this. And those are easy to think about, and those are easy to come up with lists for. This one was not easy. I had to think for a while on this one. Which tells you that the vast majority of guns are good. We kind of live in a golden age. There's so much available. When I look back to when I first started shooting seriously and teaching, the 90s, the early 2000s, there's so much more today than there was then. Look at how many ARs were available in the 90s. Look at how many good concealed carry options there were in the 90s. There were a few, but few is the key word there. We live in a good time to be a shooter. Anyway, with that, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Tactical tip of the day. If you have that 1911, we talked about 1911s, and I like 1911s. I ran them professionally as well, trusted my life to them. I got no problem running an STI and trusted my life to it, or now Staccato. Or even like a Ruger 1911. If you're talking about the classic internal extractor 1911, those, it's not a Glock, right? They need to be tuned sometimes. They require a little bit more attention to detail. If you don't know, you can just bend that in the slide. If you know what you're doing, you can take it and tune it by just using the slide. If your gun has been super reliable and you start having ejection issues, usually it doesn't give out all at once like the extractor in an AR. Usually it starts to come out of tune, I guess, like a guitar. And I'm not a guitar player, but I think that's the analogy. Like a guitar, unless the string breaks, it gradually goes out of tune. You tighten it up, tune it back up. Similar with an extractor. Now, I would encourage you, if you run a 1911 for defense, to have a spare extractor pre-tuned, pre-fit, so that when it starts to go out, you can throw a new one in there. But if you don't, you're in a class or something like that, you can probably retune that extractor by taking it and bending it. Audio is not the right format for that, but note that you can do it. So if you're running a 1911 in a class and you start, it's been reliable heretofore, right? Those extractors don't last forever. Just like the recoil spring doesn't last forever. They're consumable parts. Consider it like an oil change in your car, right? Oil doesn't last forever. Coolant doesn't last forever. These things don't last forever. You can probably tune that, at least get you through the class. Or get you a couple of 100 rounds until you get your new whatever extractor and get it tuned. And again, if you have the forethought, get one and pre-tune it. That way you have a spare that you can just take out. They're not hard to take out and replace. That's one of the good things about them. So maybe have another pre-tuned extractor. They're not crazy expensive, at least compared to the 1911. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. Tactical verse today, since I was hard on some guns, hard on some manufacturing, I don't like to be. I would love for every gun to be a 10 out of 10. But I'm also not going to pee on you and tell you that it's raining. A couple of verses here. You shall do no injustice in judgment, in measurements of length, weight, or volume. You shall have honest scales, honest weights, an honest ephah, and an honest hin. Likewise, you shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. In righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. Be sober, be circumspect. God gives us these things for our good. It's wise. It's wise. If you just talk about it in the gunfighting realm, don't be so emotionally invested in a gun, or I spent this money on it, so I'm just going to be an apologist for this gun. I'm just going to make all these excuses as to why it doesn't work. Because the guy that's trying to kill you, if it's a gunfighting gun, is not going to care why you really want it to work because you're emotionally invested in it. Or because you like the brand and you're brand loyal, right? The guy that's trying to kill you doesn't care about that. This is good wisdom in life. It applies to way more than just gunfighting, but be honest and sober. Don't be partial to the poor. Don't take a bribe. Don't honor the person of the mighty. Have honest scales, honest weights. You shall not have in your bag differing weights, a heavy and a light. You shall not have in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You shall have a perfect and a just weight, perfect and a just measure. Be sober-minded. Judge righteously. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.